My name's Paul Hill, one of the founders of the 1020 Networking Group. Welcome to the 1020 Networking Podcast. I'm joined this afternoon by Debs Weatherell from the HR department and by Emma Lodge of TaxAssist Park Gate. The topic of conversation, I'm going to lead these two to tell you exactly what it's all about. Debs.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for the introduction. So today we're looking at pains and pitfalls for SMEs in HR and in finance. And hopefully we can discuss some of the key topics that are being affected by our local SMEs and what we can do to try and help them.
Okay, so do you want to kick off with it, Emma? What is one of the main topics?
The main topics in regarding SMEs and problems that they're experiencing, definitely number one for me would be cash flow. I think in the current economic climate, there's a lot of uncertainty. Fluctuations in revenue are seen across the board in lots of different industries. But there are things that business owners can do to help with this. One of the biggest ones is to have a stash of emergency funds for situations that are outside of your control, really focusing on your budgeting, monitoring your income and expenses, which is where people like me come in, and really knowing your numbers. And another possibility is possibly to diversify income streams.
How does that work with what you do? Because we've got this podcast together for you working together. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, I think we're both in professional services, so it's a sort of mutual understanding, and what affects Emma affects my business as well, in a different side, in that I'm the people side, Emma's the finance and the tax side of things. But we see constraints also in financial areas with the rising costs of employers' contributions, which has hit people incredibly hard. In my own personal business, for example, that's gone up by £500 a month, which isn't insignificant in a micro business. So that affects things like their decisions on hiring, potentially. It affects their decisions on expansion and growth. And I think it's inhibiting growth and expansion. I don't know what you think about that, Emma.
I think that's definitely a common theme, particularly with the rising costs in minimum wage and also employee contributions and employer contributions changing. But across the board, operational costs have been soaring. So that's anything from utility bills to supplies, fuel, etc. And the knock-on effect of that is that potentially people aren't hiring as many people in your arena, which, as you say, is now then affecting businesses in terms of their manpower, what their output is. So it seems to be a cyclical situation that we're facing at the minute, which is very difficult.
Would you say it's really important now because people are having to cut back on staff because of the national insurance? Is it more important now for you to be able to find exactly the right sort of people for Emma's clients?
I think it's always important to try and be as proactive as possible. And I think the issue there is with rising costs, people are making distressed purchases rather than sort of forward-thinking purchases. And that will put them on the back foot instantly. They're also looking for what I would call sort of bargain basement options rather than quality and value. So it does affect decision making. And I think people are quite good at appointing an accountant when they start a business, but they're not so good at HR. And they will wait until something nasty happens before looking for professional advice and support. So it's an increasingly difficult. You would think with the Employment Rights Bill coming in, starting now and over the next 2 years, it would make people think more about being proactive and getting their policies up to date, getting engaged with a decent HR consultant. But they're not. I think because of the financial, the economic uncertainty, they're making tardy decisions, really.
I think that's it. And a big thing that can come into play, which is really helpful, is having a business plan right from the word go, because that does organise your thoughts in terms of your strategy regarding employees, potentially what's required of them, whether you can make efficiencies in other areas, but where you're headed and making sure that they're on board, because that in itself, by educating your staff and making sure everyone's doing everything the same way, operationally you're more efficient, but also the end goal is more easily achievable if everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah. I mean, we do our own people strategy every year, which is sort of obviously an addendum to the business plan. But I think every business, regardless of how small they are, should do that, because often your payroll is your biggest outlay. And so why wouldn't you invest in making sure that people are pulling in the right direction to help you succeed, and grow your business? Otherwise, you can be literally rudderless in the middle of a lack of direction ocean, um, which really won't help you.
That's interesting you said that, because why is it that people are reticent to invest the money they need to do? Because I know from listening to you give your talks that you've got the horror stories of people that should have come to you, and had they come to you, it would have been a cost of several £100s a month to tens of thousands of pounds a month as a result. What stops them coming to you?
I think, and I know I've said it in the 1020 networking group, it's ostrich syndrome. They bury their heads in the sand, and you probably see that from a financial perspective as well. It'll never happen to me, and then it does, and by which time it's often too late to turn it around. Sometimes we can turn things around, but having the infrastructure in place, having a trusted business partner and advisor is crucial to running a successful business.
I think the two words that you use, proactive and reactive, are really important, because if there is that plan in place, starting with a business plan and where you're heading and where you want to be at different stages and revisiting it, inevitably along the journey there are going to be problems, but they're much easily or readily able to be sorted ahead of time, as opposed to getting in the situation where you're knee deep in mud and then having to work out a solution at that point in time. Yeah, I think, and the rudderless element, it's really difficult when you start a business, because lots of people are really good, they've got great ideas, but the actual planning and the running of the business is very different to coming up with the idea and perhaps looking at competitors, how you're marketing it, what's required from those employees to reach various targets. And it is a continuous reassessment of what you're doing and where you're going. And as you said, the outlay on staff is such a huge investment. It's so important that you get it right the first time.
It's really interesting you say, because I know you as an accountant, and most people will say an accountant does my taxes. They make sure that I pay the right taxes. They make sure that I'm avoiding tax rather than evading tax. But there's so much more to what you do. There's so much more to actually the planning behind it, which includes staff, which includes buildings, which includes just about everything that people are unaware that accountants actually deal with, linking in with Debs as well.
Definitely, because say, for instance, a really good example at the minute is the hospitality industry. With the increases in wages and relevant sort of NI costs, they are really struggling on the back of COVID. On top of that, they've also got utility costs that have gone through the roof. So the difference in my type of role is that we actually see people's bank accounts, we're dealing with their payroll. So we are best suited to be able to say, hang on a minute, these are areas that you can actually make savings in, whether it's getting somebody to analyse the electricity bills or the waste bills, or to have a look at their rotas and their plans and do some costings and some analysis to work out actually if they're utilising their staff at the best times, or unfortunately if there is actually dead labour hours which aren't being effective in terms of running the actual business. So again, there are a lot of things that you can do to help with issues like cash flow or staffing issues, but you're better to grab the bull by the horns and do it ahead of time rather than dealing with the problem at the end.
So it's not all just about number crunching and finding a way to get rid of unruly staff.
No, absolutely, and I think you need to think of your business. You need to play to your strengths and outsource your weaknesses. So by bringing on board an accountant and an HR consultancy, you've got those people who actually form part of your board or your extended board, and that's how I see my accountant. When I'm looking, I've just taken on a new staff member full time, which is exciting. The first thing I do, having analysed my own books, is to go to my accountant and say, can I afford to do this? And they're the voice of reason. Yes, you can. So we work really well together in that regard. And I think some small business owners forget to reach out to their accountant or their HR consultant and actually include them as part of that strategic decision-making process.
I think traditionally, though, people in the service industry have billed by the minute or, by the block of time. And so there is a bit of a fear factor where people are going to end up with big bills. I think there's been a huge change in my industry anyway to offer a fixed fee, which is spread out across the course of the year so that people know what they're paying at any point in time, and then they can pick up the phone and within reason ask you for certain pieces of advice that are included in their package. And that's all part of the planning, the business strategy, knowing your cash flow, and so that the business owner does actually know where they're at month to month.
How do we get across to people that you guys are not a necessary evil, you're intrinsic to a business? Because a necessary evil is a basis of, oh my God, I've not done my tax returns. I've got a letter from the Inland Revenue saying they're going to do X, Y, and Z. I need to go and see my accountant now. The stuff that you asked them for 18 months ago, and people going, oh God, we need to get rid of this person. They're not doing that. We've done this, we've done this, we've done this. And you go, hang on a minute. You haven't even got a contract in place. You haven't adhered to any of the guidelines. That's what people tend to do. But we need to get them to feel that you're intrinsic to their business, don't we?
We do, and I think with the forthcoming Fair Work Agency, that's going to be a bit like HMRC for human resources, because they're going to be able to audit businesses, go back and see if they've been practicing in maverick fashion, and they'll be able to levy claims against them and charge them right back to the date of incorporation. So people really need to start getting their house in order. They don't know that everything under the Employment Rights Bill is definitely going to be coming in, but I think that's one that absolutely will, because I think people think it's time that it needs to be in place.
And that's scary that they can backdate it right to incorporation.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think it's a good time now to get your house in order, because I think they'll only make examples of businesses where they have shown really poor practice.
Okay, I get that. How does this affect you?
I think as part of the bigger picture for business owners, similarly, we're facing regulatory changes next year with Making Tax Digital coming in. One of the biggest benefits I see, whilst people may perceive it as being more cumbersome, it's another opportunity to have touch points with people that are self-employed or landlords, whereby you're quarterly chatting to them, finding out what's going on, as you said, rather than the compliance element, which is, oh, it's the year end, I need a tax return doing. So I think the more people do want to be educated, or perhaps in certain instances their hand is forced slightly where they are having to comply with different legislation, etc., longer term it will be beneficial in terms of having more information readily available, more contact with people like Debs and myself, and so that hopefully it makes their life a lot easier running their business, and that they don't have so many concerns longer term, because that's one of the issues that both of us face running our own businesses. You're wearing so many hats so much of the time, and trying to do it all yourself is actually not possible. So as you rightly say, hand over the bits that you're not as qualified in, or perhaps not as knowledgeable about, and let people that are able to help you do that. Because I think in the current economic climate, things are a lot tougher. It is affecting people's mental health. That's the reality. I think something like 71% of businesses fail within the first 3 years. Yeah. And that's a lot to carry on your own. So this is where people like Debs and I, and I'm sure Debs feels the same, that we're getting a lot of phone calls whereby people want to have a discussion and have a chat. And that's really important. And it's one of the bits I really enjoy about my job, because you get to know people really well, and that helps them not only from a tax planning perspective, but also knowing them as an individual and hopefully making their life a bit easier.
Makes sense.
It can be quite a lonely position being MD or CEO of a business, because obviously there are layers of transparency, and whilst you want to operate as transparently as you can to encourage good engagement with your staff, there are obviously some things that have to be kept a little bit behind. And absolutely, we get the same. I get a phone call, somebody who really just wants somebody who they can talk to discreetly as a business advisor, as a trusted advisor. And I think they get enormous relief from being able to do that with us. And I'm sure you do as well. And mental health, yeah, it affects everybody. It's been huge since COVID. Obviously, we've seen in the news this last week that it's a huge pressure on the economy. It's also pressure on individuals, and how to manage it effectively is really important. I think there's a major misunderstanding about what good HR is about. People say we're hirers, firers, and policy police, and that's so untrue. Given the right proactive approach and direction, it's statistically proven that businesses will succeed and grow better through investing in good HR.
The thing is, you do deal with hiring and firing, but it's not all about the hiring and firing.
No, there's so much more to it, and it's the strategic, it's the proactive stuff that will make you set yourself apart from your competition, have a better culture, succeed, win tenders, etc.
I think the culture is really important, because if you invest in your people, they are your brand and they are your company. And what better people to sell the company or the services that you offer than the people that work within it. So I think, for me anyway, culture is a really important topic that should form part of your initial business plan, because it's really determines so much about the trajectory that you're going to go on, and perhaps the journey as well.
And it's making sure that culture is adopted by everybody, right from the CEO down to the lowliest employee, whatever it is they do, because people don't leave companies, they leave their bosses.
Yeah, and leading by example and having decisions that are fairly approached across all levels and layers is absolutely crucial. And so one final thing I wanted to touch on was around the sort of flexible work, hybrid working, the remote working, that is also a major issue in my field at the minute. People have the right now to request from day one to make 2 requests per annum, and businesses are getting frustrated with the timescales that it takes to look at them, the responses required, and that they only have 8 fair reasons to reject. I mean, I'm seeing probably at least once a month clients that come to us saying, yeah, but I just want them in the office. But that's not a reasonable reason to refuse. It just isn't. If you work in a production line and it's crucial that that person sat opposite you, then yes, that's reasonable to refuse. If they have to be physically there, that's a reasonable reason. But it is creating issues, and people are not dealing with it effectively, and it will really create problems in the future for them.
There's a lot of old school thinking amongst managers and companies. I know from personal experience in my own family where people wanted to work remotely and they were say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Then COVID happened and people had to work remotely, and all of a sudden they were going, oh my God, it can work. People can be happy at home and add value to their companies by working at home.
They can, but having the infrastructure in place is again crucial. I was talking to this week or last week at the networking group where somebody failed to put in place a hybrid or flexible working or remote working rather policy, and so actually an employee who was massively underperforming was able to prove at Tribunal that he didn't know what he was supposed to do, which is basically turn up for work and do what his job description said, and won £17,000 plus a 25% uplift for having not followed policy and procedure themselves. So there's a lesson.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the law's the law. And if it says you've got to provide this, this, and this, and you don't, you're going to get fined. And you deal with that all the time. And it's the same with accountancy, isn't it? File, don't file. Don't file, pay the fine.
Penalties, absolutely.
Ooh. Right, ladies, it's been absolutely marvellous listening to you. I've learned a few things, and I network with you guys a lot. But I've learned some stuff that I didn't actually know, which is the whole point of this. Guys, I hope you find this podcast useful. If you need any advice from these 2 ladies, please look at our website. You'll find their details. They are absolutely amazing at what they do. So get in contact, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks very much, Debs, and you, Emma.
Thank you.